welcome back to All Things Acura, because I'm usually the one that does it, but it can be you. That's totally fine.
Why not? So yes, welcome back to All Things Acura. I'm Dustin.
I'm Matt.
And I'm Justin.
This is I like it. This is excellent. I like this start so far. So welcome back to All Things Acura. We are on episode, is this 28? This is 29.
29.
We don't know what episode this might be, so we're not going to count the episodes anymore.
We're approaching 30.
We are approaching.
That's a pretty big milestone.
We could be at 30.
I do want to say.
It could be the first podcast not to count them.
Well, I guess
Trust me, I've listened to plenty of podcasts. We are not the first to not to count them.
See?
Well, when they put them up, they put the episode number. I don't know if they talked about the episode number. Anyway, it's Dustin has been with us for, is it officially a year now?
A year last month, actually. The 12th.
That's awesome. So sorry
Happy
for
birthday.
that. Yeah, apologize for that. So
we apologize to everybody that's been in the industry at least a year.
That's right.
Well, yeah. I'm on 4 now, so.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, with us.
We all have a love-hate relationship with this industry. It's a great time, but obviously with any job, there's frustrations. That's just how it goes. It doesn't matter what you do. But
so
again,
now we're going to talk about our love-hate relationship with the Acura RDX.
That's right. That's right. So today, if you watched the last episode, which I think it was our last one, or whenever it came out, Justin and I talked about the MDX, our love-hate relationship with it, some of the things we liked, some of the things we didn't like, and it really got a lot of good feedback. I know some of the comments, people really liked that we talked about that, and we did try to be as open and honest as not like we don't try to be that way, but I think it was important to have that conversation.
We'll set the record straight. I mean, we like the RDX, just like we like the MDX.
Right.
But
Just
every
like,
vehicle could be better.
Yeah, every vehicle could be better, just like every product you ever bought
That's
could
true.
be better.
Yeah, that's a fair point.
Every product you ever bought.
Everything?
Everything.
Literally everything could be better.
Yeah, there's always something that, not everything, whether it's a house that you buy, it's not going to check every box that you might want. Yeah.
Come on now.
Yeah, that touches home.
Come on now.
Touches home.
Yeah, that's right. Literally touches
See
home.
what you did.
Right. That was not on purpose. But, everything that you buy, there's boxes that you're going to check or not check, but you still have to make the decision on a vehicle. So, while again we really like the RDX. In fact, that's honestly one of my favorite cars. In fact, I've been trying to lease one, Justin, but it's we'll talk. That's another podcast.
We'll get into that.
We'll get into that.
So Acura's on the 3rd generation of the Acura RDX.
Yes.
Did not exist before that. Came out in 2007. Mm-hmm. And interesting enough, it came out with a 4-cylinder turbo.
Yep.
Actually, was that Acura? That was Acura's first 4-cylinder turbo.
It was, yeah.
And was that Honda's?
If I'm honest, I don't really remember. I know that was prior to our time. Maybe we should have looked that up, but I don't think it. I don't know if it was right. Was there anything prior to that?
Prior to 2007, in a Honda product that had a turbo.
No.
So, someone might have to. Might have to double check.
Put that in the comments if anybody knows that.
Well, here.
Well, y'all look. Yeah, that's true. We have. You were the little resource there, but
he can just Google it.
And I think other than that, even after that, we hadn't had any turbocharged vehicles up until 2019 when they did bring back the new RDX. So the 2007 to 2012 was the first generation RDX, which had the 4-cylinder turbo like we talked about. And then the next generation, the second generation, was 13 through 18, which brought on the naturally aspirated V6. During that brief intermission, which you didn't know that we had, we did look up the information regarding turbocharged engines with Honda and Acura world. And it turns out that was the first production vehicle that Honda or Acura released here in the United States was the 2007 RDX.
I thought that, but I'm glad we looked it up because I wasn't sure if there was another one.
Because sometimes, I don't know all of Honda's history going way back in time, but there could have been a small turbocharged engine way back when, and I wouldn't have any idea because that was prior to me being alive. But anyway, actually would have, I guess it would have been. Anyway, so obviously that's an important milestone for Honda and Acura because that's kind of what their mainstay was these naturally aspirated engines. We're literally over the course of time. Now we're in a very different time. But the other thing I wanted to talk about with the first generation RDX was the super handling all-wheel drive.
Yeah, and I even made a note of that because it's interesting. That was on the first generation, went away for the second generation, and got it back.
Yeah.
So what did they replace it with for the second gen?
It was Honda's intelligent all-wheel drive system that was the same that they took out of the CR-V.
Okay.
And You know, I just had this conversation today with a client that we were talking about that, and it's really, you know, we don't hear that a lot, that people are excited that they brought that back. And I know we're in 2023 now, and we talked about this now, and I will get into the 19 RDX, but they did bring it back. And, you know, from us, I think we felt like it was a super important thing for Acura to bring on to the models because of its capability and its performance and all that great stuff that comes with super handling all-wheel drive. And to be fair to Acura with the second gen, I don't know how many people really cared, and I feel like that's part of the reason that they didn't put it on the second generation.
Well, that was their point. I think for the cost of putting that better all-wheel drive system, they felt wasn't worth it, and the customers didn't notice. And
right.
Arguably, being here, I don't know that many noticed.
And maybe still today.
I mean, we were sad, but
Yeah.
I don't know that the customers were. And that's disappointing as a, you know, to have such a great all-wheel drive system and people just not care about it. You know, maybe we're a little biased towards it, but it does a lot of great things, and you know. But it's back, so we don't have to cry over it anymore.
That's right. That's true.
But just know, if you go back into the used car market and you're looking for a pre-owned one that, you know, it's that second generation, 13 through 18, had that irregular all-wheel drive system. Not that it's bad.
Yeah.
It's just not what
It's not a torque vectoring. It's
Right.
like a front wheel drive bias primarily. It's like 80% of the wheel power to the front, like all the time, and sometimes it can do 50% of the power to the back. I'm not going to get into all-wheel drive. We can talk about that another time. But again, going into like the generation, so now the 19 was when they redesigned the RDX. That was the major overhaul of that vehicle. So here we are with that third generation.
And the refresh in 2022, what they call a mid-model refresh, halfway through the life cycle of this current RDX. We got some upgrades, some changes.
Yeah.
And so that's what we're here to talk about, the 2023, but bring you back up to speed of how we got there.
Yeah, and it was kind of a long journey. I remember when we talked about the second generation, you know, prior to was kind of boring, and that was like the big complaint. And that's kind of what this new one changed a lot of. It changed that perception of the Acura brand. In fact, Acura used the new RDX as the kind of the beginning point for the rest of our brand to say, hey, we're back as a performance kind of luxury brand. This car is going to be more exciting. It's going to offer more dynamic driving style, all of that stuff, which it does. So while we do love the RDX for everything that it is, obviously there's lots to like about it, lots to not like. Dustin, I know this is where you kind of started with Acura, whereas where we're at now. And it's kind of funny, like as we kind of went through that whole, that kind of those pain points that we heard from a lot of people in that car, you got to jump right into it, which is a great car. And I'm sure you like it, you know, too. So
I mean, yeah, it's one of the things where I'm obviously looking into getting an SUV as I get older. And yes, the RDX is definitely top of my list if I can ever afford it. But
it's a hard car not to like with what you get for the value.
Yeah.
I mean, if you look out there in the marketplace, and I know this is a tough category now because there's so many smaller or medium size. I mean, it seems a little bigger than maybe what it used to be.
Well, it's funny that you bring that up about the stuff you get for the value, because Matt and I were actually in the car about an hour ago, and I was on the phone with a client of mine, and he kept comparing the RDX to Volvo, to BMW, the X3, and he was comparing the price points, and he kept coming back to, for the price point of the X3, which even their M line at $59,000, it didn't come with ventilated front seats. It didn't come with a wireless phone charger. It didn't come with wireless Apple CarPlay, Android Auto, and you're paying $4,000 more than the top of the line RDX.
Yeah.
And he made those same points along with Volvo and Audi, and even Mercedes, where the value that you're getting, the amount of stuff that you get in the RDX for the price point, starting in the low 40s, going up to the mid 50s, you get so much more for the money that you're spending.
Yeah. And that's true of a lot of Acura products. In the RDX, I mean, in that segment, it is a lot of value for the car. I mean, they've always done a good job of making sure that's the case, and I completely agree with that. You know, it's a super nice car for that price point.
So, I mean, a couple of things that really stand out. Obviously, that panoramic sunroof across the lineup comes standard on the car. Like that, I know we're talking about Acura, and it's a luxury brand. Yeah, I should get things, but should get panoramic roof is on no manufacturer's list.
Yeah, absolutely.
So standard equipment is that panoramic roof, which I think is awesome. That was kind of one of those, wow, they didn't have to do, but they did.
Yeah.
I think that it's the powertrain, I think, is just right. And I went through this before as I look at other cars out there on the marketplace and say, well, you either get a little or a lot, especially in that segment. You either get a smaller power plant that's underpowered, not quite enough, or too much, and it's very hard to find that right amount of power, which they've done a very good job with. Some people will argue that, oh, I want more. The BMW has more of that. The Mercedes, okay, but this is not only plenty, it's fun to drive, right?
Oh yeah, and then all of a sudden you're kind of talking about a different price point too.
Sure.
I mean, not to go back into the price point thing, but yeah, I mean, you could probably spend a lot more to get a more powerful vehicle, but do you really need that at that point? And that's up to each person, obviously. Obviously, styling. I know Acura with the 19 RDX, when they redesigned the car, that was really one of the first really bold styled cars that we had. When they changed that, I know that's something that's kind of more subjective to each person, but I feel like styling on this car is top notch. You know, I really like the proportions on it. I think they did a great job with that. The sculpted hood, the car in general. It's hard not to like stand out to the RDX and say it doesn't look like a good car. And I think even the guy we talked to earlier.
Yeah, he was talking about that it looked phenomenal. It looked like a sporty SUV.
Yeah.
And that's what he was looking to get into. I think it did a very good job. I've only seen maybe one or two of the second gen RDXs, but I think with just the ones that are coming into service. But I think what Acura really accomplished there was differentiating them from Honda.
Yeah, okay.
Because the CR-V had a bubble butt. It did. It did. It was more bubbly. It wasn't aggressive, but that's the way Honda's always been. The second gen RDX kind of had that same styling, and then with the third generation, the current one that we're on, they went straight balls to the wall, sporty, sleek lines, a slimmer rooftop. So I think they did a very good job of accomplishing what they ultimately wanted to do, differentiating the two companies.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think the one thing that the RDX really hits home on with Acura, and this is what they struggle with the last two RDXs, is that not everybody wants. MDX has always been the staple of the brand. So, and if you wanted luxury, you had to go with the MDX. Yeah. And what this new RDX introduced was a smaller package with nicer features and equipment as a nicer car. And they never had that before. And that's where BMW and Mercedes kind of always towed the rope, because you didn't have to get a bigger car to get a nicer car. Right. And that was Honda and Acura's problem for a long time, and still could be a little bit, is they think that to get nicer, you have to get bigger. Yeah. And that it always drove me nuts. It's like, it doesn't have to be bigger to be nicer, right? You can make a smaller or a medium-sized SUV, whatever class you want to put that in now, and make it nicer. And I think they did that with this. You know, does it still have everything the MDX has? Probably not. And
that's why it's a couple things, though.
That's why it's only $8,000 to $10,000 less. But it's small, like you said. You can get most of the same offerings on it now.
Yeah, exactly. It's funny when people do come in, compare the MDX to the RDX. It's like, well, at that point, it's just about size or engine, I guess. If that's the two big things that are important to you, because everything else across the board is pretty much the same. You know, there's the power steering column is in the MDX, and I guess that probably should still be with that. I'll get to that as some of the things that are disliked in a second. But and I know we pointed this out on the MDX, but like the audio system in the RDX is phenomenal. And Acura's done a really good job across the board, but I think it sounds really good in the RDX, partially because of the size. But they've done a good job with that as well.
That ELS 3D audio.
Yeah, that was
the first car to have it. And again, talking about how good of a job they did in saying we're going to recreate this. Yeah. And they did. Like, they didn't just take the old one and say, okay, let's make it a little bit better. I mean, they just wiped the slate clean and said, okay, we're going to really make something. And they did. Yeah. And that speaks to also in 2022 when they said, okay, we're going to refresh this car. Well, it still looks kind of like the other ones. Because I think they didn't want to ruin what they already had. You know, let's make it a little bit better. Let's add some nice things. They did add a nice trim level, right? Yeah. In the A-Spec Advance, which is, I think, great. Except, matter of fact, I think the MDX should get the same trim level. Right. And so I think they listened and said, okay, these are the things it's missing. This is what we should do without ruining what people like. And what people like are the styling, the looks, the different packages. Yeah,
and really, and I know this is going to, as we go through each car, because that's our goal, is we're going to talk about each car a little bit, but, Acura makes a lot of standard content. I know you mentioned that earlier, but, like, that's something that they do a really good job with all their models. And the RDX, even at a base level RDX, being able to have, like, panel moonroof, the Apple CarPlay Android Auto, the blind spot indicators, all the safety systems, stuff that, like you were saying earlier, that you should be able to find in a luxury car is now in that third generation RDX. And I bring that up because if you remember, a base model RDX, do you remember that thing in the second gen? You got a screen that was about this big.
Yeah, boy, that was one car we were almost embarrassed to sell back towards the end of its life. Anyway, at the beginning of its life, it wasn't much different as technology evolved.
Yep.
Was it the LCD screen from the Hondas?
From a Civic, yeah, literally.
It was, yeah.
And for those of you out there, listen, it's a great car. It really is. Like the RDX has always been a solid car. It lacked a lot of the stuff that they did a good job in this generation of changing, especially in the 22 when they refreshed the car. Here we are in 23. And getting all those safety systems standard, I just wish they would make the darn things.
Well, we'll talk about availability towards the end of it, but that's a whole nother subject. But they did it, like I said, as we go through this, it's hard to pick it apart because arguably it's really a hard car to tear up. So there are some things, though, that I don't know that they hit all the notes or everything they could. And who knows? Maybe in that class and at that price point, they won't. Yeah, I don't know.
That's true too.
It has grown up a little bit in price because this car used to start kind of in the mid 30s.
Yeah, I think it was like 37.
Yeah,
was like
you could get a base model, and now we're in the low 40s. So it's grown up a lot.
It has.
And so is everything else.
You got to put on your big boy pants now if you want to get one.
The eggs at the store cost more too. So everything, right?
Yeah, I walk into the store. I'm like, I'll take those eggs over there. Sir, you have enough for that? I got it. Credit.
Right.
Or they're behind. They're going to start putting them behind the plexiglass.
Yeah, that's right.
Well, they already tell you can only buy a couple.
Oh, do they really? They set a limit on the eggs.
That's awesome.
Yeah. So obviously everything has gone up in price, and I don't know where you want to start off with the dislikes. I'll let you kind of like.
Why do you have to have dislikes? Why do you have to have everything? So I don't have a whole lot with RDX. As you know, I probably drive whatever car I choose to drive here, and I'm not touting that. I'm saying that I have a choice of picking an automobile drive. I usually drive an RDX because how well-rounded it is. Yeah. It's the right size. It just the right amount of power. It's fun to drive. Yeah. I mean, there's so many things. Like I said, it's hard to argue with it.
It does hit all the right notes. Like it really does.
If I wanted to say, could they up their game? I would say that the one thing that probably I care a little less about that I think is important to a lot of people, it's probably not as quiet as some of the other cars out there in its class. And I use maybe the BMW, and I'll use the Audi as probably the example of 4 cylinders that are quieter than ours. Yeah. And I don't know why that. I mean, I know that adds cost, it adds weight, you suffer fuel economy. There's a lot of things that go into it, but it's probably not as quiet. And I think that's probably one of the things when people go from an MDX to the RDX and say it's not quite the same car, is probably because it just doesn't feel as quiet as with them.
Or RDX to RDX. People who are coming out of the previous generation who have that V6. And, again, I do like the new engine, but I think depending on where you're coming from or what you had prior, if you had that V6 before and you go into the new RDX, you hear some engine sound or exhaust note coming from the vehicle.
No, I have to use the other side. I like that. I like it. So
yeah, a little bit, yeah. And I like it
speaking from a consumer,
yeah,
I think
absolutely.
That's the point. Yeah.
Speaking from a consumer, I like it up to a point. It can get ungodly annoying with that 4-cylinder because it's a whine. It's not like.
It's a little throaty. I don't know.
You're gonna roll your eyes at me. I saw that.
Well,
but it's
does it whine more than other 4 cylinders?
I'm gonna have a very unpopular opinion here.
That's fine.
You can. Absolutely.
My Accord with the 1.5 4-cylinder turbo sounds better and throatier than the RDX does.
Touche.
I'd have to be in that drive because I have to.
You wrote in it this morning. I don't know if you were paying attention, but yes, in my opinion, it sounds better. There are better sounding 4-cylinders out there.
Yeah, for whatever reason, it's a raspy sounding, which is strange because the funny thing is I know they can do better with how it's because it doesn't sound the same way in the TLX.
Right. That's a good point.
Same power plant too, which not sure how.
Yeah. So is that based on because there's not enough of the foam that they?
Well, I think so. Yeah, it's an insulation. It could be how the powertrain's mounted into the car. I mean, there's a lot of variables.
Just could be hearing it more.
Well, the fact that it's an SUV too, as opposed to like a car. I mean, That is the one thing. Now, to kind of squash all that, because I personally, like you're saying, really, I don't mind the sound of it. I think it's fine to me. But you only hear it when you're accelerating, right? And I think that's an important thing to do, because guess what? You're not always doing. You're not always accelerating. So, and it's really like on harder accelerations is when it really,
and in the newer one, the 23, they did help that. It is quiet.
Yeah,
it's noticeably quieter. Matter of fact, when I get in a 19, I use that example because we're getting a lot of them off lease or coming in. I notice it immediately that it's different. So
they did add more sound deadening in 22.
It's dramatically different than what it was. So if you drove one in the past and you said, well, maybe that was one of the things that just didn't hit it off well with it, is now I'm just portraying that as a customer. That's a wish that I have, because that would make our jobs easier if customers As a person, I like the noise. I don't think I actually don't like a tomb-like car.
Yes.
And I think I don't want to hear the person next to me breathing. I can't stand it. Like, I want noise.
Right.
And if it's not going to be the engine, it's going to be the radio. Yeah. So I'm not big on that.
And if you follow, I'm sure if you watch our videos, you know that I drive a WRX, which is much louder than anything that we drive here, from an exhaust standpoint and from a noise insulation standpoint. In fact, driving yesterday, couldn't have a conversation with my wife, but maybe that's a good thing. But anyways, but
hopefully she doesn't watch this.
Right, she won't. So, so when I get in the RDX, I like that it has a little note to it. To me, it's quiet, right? So it depends on what you're coming from or what you're used to. So I think new people who are kind of in the market now, who have driven a lot of different cars, who have a 4-cylinder, I don't always have an opportunity to drive all these cars. So when they say it sounds fine to me, my guess is that everything else is relatively quiet in comparison. I mean, you know what I mean? I don't know if it's like, and this is probably honestly like the lowest point for me on the car in terms of that. Everything else is done really well, because, the car in general, like you said, is kind of like to me, it's almost Acura's like gold standard. Like, it kind of fits, it's like the golden ratio. It fits right where you want it to fit with regards to everything else, the price point, the size, the drive, and everything. There was one other thing I wanted to bring up as a like, and I totally forgot about this, was the trunk. It's one of my favorite components on this vehicle, and the size. So just to kind of get into that real quick, is the trunk itself, when you open the tailgate, there's quite a bit of space. And then if you haven't seen an RDX in person, there's some nice underfloor storage as you open up the different
There's a lot of
compartments.
underfloor.
There is, it's phenomenal. And I always show people that. I think that is one of my favorite little things and in the vehicle.
And I think it's underrated in it's smaller than the MDX, but I don't know that you lose as much functionality when you talk about space. It has that opening because it doesn't have those third seats in it that have to fold down like the MDX.
Right.
Usable space is not that much different. I mean, the MDX is a much larger car, but you can't tote around a whole lot more in it. You just have more seats available in the MDX.
Right. No, I'll agree with you on that one. I always make the joke that the first hidden storage compartment is for valuables, and then the second one, when you lift the up, is for smuggling. Because it is. It's so weird how it's cool. It's awesome, but it's kind of weird that you have that back. You have a storage compartment all the way in the back of the trunk. Then you have one up front. Then you have the two on the side as well that can, if you have windshield washer fluid or if you have a battery pack or anything like that, you can put it on the sides as well. So I would say functionality wise, it is fantastic. Yeah. When it comes to the trunk.
The other
and you can use it as a cooler. Because there's no spare tire, so that trunk or that hidden storage compartment can be used as a cooler, because you can just pop the top off and it drains the water.
We don't endorse that.
There's no spare tire on.
I was just about to bring that up. So this is something that I do wish they do, because an MDX has a spare tire, so there's no spare tires on. Which one?
MDX is a beefy boy. That's why.
So there's no spare tire on A-spec models of the vehicle. So if you this is a pain point for a lot of people.
A-spec
or
all-wheel drive models, because I think front-wheel drive.
Do they even make the front-wheel drive anymore?
In the RDX? Sure.
I don't know. I haven't seen one in a long time.
Not in A-spec. I mean, in the other trims.
Oh, front-wheel drive of the RDX, right?
Right.
To be fair, we don't sell a lot of front wheel.
These people might.
Oh, we did just have a used front wheel drive. Yeah, if you had so front wheel drive or A-spec models of the RDX do not have a spare tire. So if you look underneath there, and this is kind of, when you look underneath there, you're not going to see a spare, no matter what it is. So keep that in mind. So don't panic right away. So if you have one of those models, just make sure that you know that, because we have had people here who call and they're kind of sad about
Well, you got a flat tire and you didn't know you didn't have a spare.
Yeah,
Be sad.
I know. It is something I try to bring up. I think we do, in general, a good job of making sure we bring it up. But it is important to know that all the MDXs have spares except for the Type S's.
Yeah.
But the RDX is not in those trim level, the front wheel drives and A specs. So
Yeah,
And they're full size spares.
yeah,
It is a full size spare. Same.
Yeah.
It's a nice. It's not the same wheel on the car because they want you to fix it, but it is a nice spare tire.
correct.
Now, to be fair to Acura, we could beat them up on the spare tire, but most manufacturers don't have a spare tire anymore. If
Right.
you haven't checked lately in your car shop, and you should, because I think you'd be surprised to see that spare tires have gone to heaven.
And I think it's
Yeah, that's right.
or gone to hell, depending on how you look at it.
I don't think anybody ever hated their spare tire.
No, yeah, they hated the thing, but
Weight.
I mean, you don't want to have
I
to
mean, I
use
guess their excuse is to shed weight, but
Well, yeah, I do agree. I mean,
Yeah.
I don't know the cost. And people say, well, it's cost. Well, I don't know that the inflator kit and everything they give you is a whole lot cheaper than a steel wheel and a small tire. It is a weight and space saving.
which is hilarious to me because if manufacturers really cared that much about weight, why put a panoramic moonroof on there?
Well, that's
that's
what
what
we-
it's a trade off,
Yeah.
right? You want those features, trade something else, and I think
Yeah.
that's what you know. I think we're gonna see a lot of trade offs as
Yeah.
time goes on.
Right,
As
exactly.
you want things, you have to give up generally something else,
Yeah.
or the car either gets expensive, bloated, whatever. You know, these
Yeah.
things happen.
So some of the other things that I think are a little bit of pain points is the same thing on all of our cars is the screen. When we talked about the MDX does have a bigger infotainment screen than the RDX by I think it's 2 inches. It's like almost 2. Is it 10.5 I think versus 12 and a half. So it's about 2 inches between the two. Now, the MDX does a better job of utilizing that screen, so I think that's something that I wish they would update on the RDX, because when you have like an advanced package and you're using the surround view camera, they kind of don't
Yeah, the other
utilize
part of
that
the
right part of the screen.
30% of the screen is not in operation, which
Yeah,
is really
weird
strange.
because like the MDX does that, and I'm like, well, I'll just do that, and I don't know. I do wish they would kind of change that. Obviously, they refresh the car. Who knows? We have 3 more years potentially left of this model.
So it does have the
But
touchpad.
It does have a touchpad.
No
so
touchscreen.
No touchscreen. And I know we talked about that, but
We talked about it with the MDX. We didn't talk about it with the RDX, but it's the same pain point.
Yeah, same pain point, and it's a smaller screen too. So I think they needed, maybe a touchscreen would be beneficial. I know it's kind of up in your too far away to really reach, but we've already got a lot of comments saying I just wish they would make it a touchscreen. It's really not that bad. I don't think it's that bad.
Well, the operation, I like the operation of touchpad.
Yeah.
I just think it should do both, because there's so many of you that want to touch things.
Yeah.
Like you got to touch your phone. You got to
touch your phone.
So give them the touchscreen. Give them what they want. Cars that have touchscreen, I don't find that operation better. I know everybody wants it. It's not.
I think the touchpad's better.
I know I
I
do.
have a touchscreen.
Once you use the touchpad and understand how it works and get used to it, it's way better than you licking your phone and touching the screen and doing everything else
Yeah.
you want to do
Oh,
with
yeah.
it.
Licking
It's-
your phone?
Yeah,
Well,
because they're fascinated
Sometimes
with
you do,
touching
yeah.
it, right?
Yeah.
We're fascinated with the phone, and that's what they want in their car.
Right.
Yeah.
But I think if we made both, it would work.
I wish it would stop being dual screen. I hate that.
You mean with like the 2 little
Well,
screens?
Yeah,
So
that is so stupid.
yeah, so
Put
the
in
RDX is
software
the same as the MDX. It
Yes.
has a split.
Yeah, it does. But the MDX does a little bit better job of utilizing it.
It does.
But the one I just thought about this as I was looking at our notes on the MDX was the back seat on the RDX. Just make it move a little bit.
Yeah, it is. It's a comfortable back seat, but it is fixed.
Oh, you mean like on the MDX how you can move it
Yeah.
forward and back?
Well, no, not that, but like that you
You
can't
can't
tilt
recline
it.
it.
Oh,
Like
okay.
every other, I don't know of any that you can't other than the RDX. It is comfortable.
So that's a newer thing, though. I think cars
Yeah.
of yesteryear, there weren't many you could ever even move those. So,
2012 Forester, you could.
well, I mean, over the years,
yeah,
some
sure.
of them you could.
Calm
but-
down, Subaru.
Boy, that thing was super fast. It wasn't fast. Yeah, right.
Well, there you go. It wasn't fast, but you got your reclining seats.
That's right.
Right.
Yeah, but at least I
Well,
was
that's
comfortable
you had
when
a
I
place
parked
to
the car.
rest while it was trying to get to
was.
your destination.
There you
It was-
go.
Yeah, I mean, again, these are going to be little things because I just feel like those are little things I wish. People do say that they're like, well, how do I recline these seats? I'm like, well, you can't. And I think when you're in sales trying to sell something, you want to have this. Oh, really?
I've literally
that's-
never had someone
Well,
ask that.
I think a lot of people don't realize, even if their car does that now,
You're probably right. Yeah, I think that's it. And you're right. I think of yesteryear, maybe there was more cars that did that. But I think as time has gone on, there probably are less cars that do that. And maybe it's just for like, I know for a long time, well, it's like rigidity purposes, just like in the older TL, they didn't want those back seats moving, when they had just the pass through. That's part of like the design of the car, right? So there's that part of it. There's not too many other things that kind of bother me.
It's a hard car to pick things apart. I'm looking at just even Jog could say, well, this is what I like or don't like about it. I mean, there are a couple of little things that if we really want to get granular on it, it's annoying to me that it still has non-LED rear turn signals.
Oh yeah. I did have one person talk about that one time.
I didn't even think about that.
And I know that's a nitpick, but in this day on that car probably should.
Everything else is LED. Even the front turn signals are LED.
Right. But it has actually in the front they made up for part of it because the front turn signals on the RDX do something that was revolutionary for Acura, and they had the LED daytime running lights.
Yep.
And the turn signal was separate, so the LED light stayed on. Whereas most cars, it shuts off.
Boy, if you're driving one of those cars, just know your car looks dumb in the front when that happens.
Yeah. And there's really no...
It honestly looks like your headlight went out.
Yeah. Right. It's not. I don't know. The LEDs are bright enough. It's not like it's necessary for one to go off to turn the other.
Yeah. So, well, I think a lot of them, like you were saying, they utilize the same strip or same bar or whatever. Right. Just make it LED. So the other, like the MDX and our other cars are LED. Like, just make it LED.
Yeah, that was the only. It's just that rear turn signal, and the rest of it, like I said, is LED and it looks great. And they're awesome lights. And
the other thing too was like the packaging. We talked about that on the MDX. When someone comes in and they want, I know maybe it's a big ask when you say, hey, I want second row heated seats, right, or even ventilated seats. And this goes back to when I talked about the MDX. I almost wish there was like a package where you can get that stuff where you're not paying the price of an advanced package to get all those things, like second row heated seats or even cooled seats, and maybe heated steering wheel. I know we can add it, but I think those are like little creature comforts that when you look at other brands, and I'm talking about brands that are not luxury brands, like those, like we'll talk about some of the competitors to it, like, well, I guess, I'll bring this up as a competitor is the Nissan Murano. People do bring that up, and
sure, that's shop. It's a price point almost.
It is almost the same, and as you spend the most amount of money for a Nissan Murano, it's going to be significantly less than our highest end. I'm not saying the Nissan Murano is what you should go and buy because I don't like that car at all. But like as far as feature set goes,
are they still making the Murano?
When I said that, I honestly just thinking I don't even know if they still have, because I haven't had anyone ask about that in a while. So maybe they stopped making it, or people just hated it enough. I don't know.
I know we took one in trade.
You can still buy a 2023 Nissan.
Okay, so they exist. So, okay.
They do.
So yeah, that.
And I'm pretty sure they have the same trim levels as they've had since they've
like platinum. Out. So I guess I just wish like there was something that was in between for someone who doesn't they get that they're spending more because it's a nicer car and everything.
So Honda's going through this a little bit now. They have these new packages that they're starting to come out with on top of the regular trim levels, and it's a little dicey. I don't disagree, but you really get into a lot of we're already still in this inventory world where things just you only get what they want to make, and there's only so much, and we're still limited supply. So they complicate that with more trims and more packages. Could be difficult, especially at that price point. I don't know. I don't disagree. I would like some intermediate package. I do love. Sorry to interrupt. I do love that they made a heated steering wheel available, and you can add it to any of them. So let's just bolt this thing on. It's a dealer installed option. I think that's a great.
Yeah. Well, yeah, and to be fair, the heated steering wheel is a great thing to offer because there's people that don't want to pay the 54 for the advanced.
Right, but to Matt's point is maybe they wanted, a surround view camera.
Yeah, right.
And you can't get that unless you go all the way up.
Yeah. So nuke the base.
I love the base though.
Nuke the base package. Make the tech the standard. Like the tech maybe the tech would be the new base, and then have one before the A spec that or even right after the A spec that does give you that.
If they said, hey, here's a tech package, right? But it's like a all-weather package, price it the same as an A spec, but give you things like cooled seats, second row heated seats, heated steering wheel. like a mini advanced package.
I hear, yeah,
Right.
and I think that's good. I really think it's a good idea. I think you could have
Run that by me again.
So price the tech package the same way as an A-Spec,
Okay.
but add cooled seats, second row heated seats, heated steering wheel. I don't care about the heads-up display. I don't necessarily care about the surround view camera. Maybe some people do, but at that point, you're talking about adding some major features. Maybe you should just get an advanced package.
Right.
But the creature comfort things that they're like, okay, I get that. I don't have to spend an advanced package. And just price it the same as an A-Spec.
So you're trading that all the other A-Spec features.
Yeah, well, sure.
Yeah.
Right. And that's a great point. Yeah, like kind of like how they make the A-Spec Advanced, which, by the way, I know we didn't talk about the packages, but the RDX does a really good job at the packages. Base, Tech, A-Spec, Advanced, A-Spec Advanced. You know, and maybe that's where that the Tech package lives, is like, hey, you get the features of the Tech package, you know, or you get the features of the Advanced package, but it looks like a Tech. You know what I mean?
Well, and that actually could be how the Tech evolves down the road,
Yeah.
because the Tech package has kind of gone away. It used to be the navigation,
Right.
right? And now that's not even a thing, right? You could have a Tech.
I don't know why I even
without
talk
navigation.
about that anymore. The navigation being a thing. But yeah, so the packaging is great. I did jot down a quick little note, was what happened to the Type S RDX?
Well, that was my one dislike, that they never came out with the Type S, and I don't. Now at this point, 2023, I don't think we're going to see that in this generation, because they're not going to come out with a Type S for 1 year. I mean, it's just too much development. So
there was rumblings of it though.
there was, and I think if there was one car that, you know, I put on my wish list of top cars to buy, it would be an RDX Type S, right? Because it embodies everything you love about the car, and then giving it more power and performance.
And it's not going to be $75,000.
And it's not going to be, or close, but it's not going to be as expensive as an MDX Type S.
Sure.
And,
It'll be like in the mid 60s, right? Because that's what it would end up happening.
What
It'll
a
be a
home
little-
run to us it would be.
Honestly, it might even be it might be
Well,
in
it
the
could
low
be-
60s, because look at the TLX Type
It'd be
S.
TLX.
It depended how
close they are. in
Right.
price.
It would depend on how if you wanted to do how like the MDX did, or more like the TLX. But I think it would be a ton of car for that price, even if it's in the mid 60s. I think it, you know, and you put the same engine that's in the Type S TLX.
Right.
I know. I mean, it follows suit, right?
Right.
It only makes sense, right? And plus, it's a smaller displacement engine, so hopefully it would fit in there.
You
I
might
don't
even
know,
get better
but-
MPG.
So
Right.
If you put the 355 horsepower V6 in there, you might even
Those
get
are hopes
better
and
miles
dreams
per
that-
gallon.
So if you're looking in the crystal ball, though, when they design the next RDX, which is probably already designed, right? It's already already on the table. It's going to have this
MDX and skip
an
a year.
electric power plant. I mean, it's going to be.
They're just gonna like call it the ZDX.
So
Don't even.
hopefully they would release the new RDX, and then a year later, like they did with the Integra and TLX,
TLX MDX.
MDX, come out with the Type S version. So let's hope that that's how that plays out, because I think I'd like
If
that.
any Acura execs watch this and you just planted the seed in their head to nuke the RDX and replace it with the ZDX, I'm gonna be really mad
I'm
at
really
you.
sorry. Yeah.
Don't worry, Acura's not watching.
Right, and just so I guess that kind of goes into like what we're seeing next. So we're on the 23. So 22 was refreshed. 23, we maybe have one more year of this generation.
Yeah, I was gonna say we'll probably expect one more year, and it could be a short year actually. It could be 24. Could be a short year on that.
It could be.
So we're probably next year-ish away from.
Which is kind of crazy to think about. You know, we'll see what happens with the ZDX. I'm only saying that because we don't know exactly what space that ZDX is filling in terms of size. It does look like it's an, I guess, RDX-ish size vehicle. So we'll see what that looks like. So whether or not they want to continue forward with that is another thing. So
Might be.
where do you go?
Well, Dustin has to leave.
I do have to leave.
take
I
care of the
apologize.
customer.
We'll wrap this up. Thanks for your input, Dustin.
Yeah, appreciate you.
Great job today.
Doing it.
We'll give you extra points.
Power steering column. I know you had that on your list of.
I did, you know, and I think that's one thing people do ask about that. That why doesn't it have a power steering column? And maybe that's a little thing, and not that you should spend more to get an MDX to have that, but maybe they do put something like that on an advanced package or a higher trim level.
I like it because it screams luxury. I don't necessarily like having one. I don't. The functionality doesn't do a lot for me. Steering columns are set it and forget it, and unless there's multiple people driving the car, I like to leave it where it's at.
But I'll tell you why I like it, because it matches with the memory seats.
Yeah, it does.
That's the best part about that, because like I don't like to touch my wife's steering wheel on her Honda Odyssey because I know that's where she likes it. So I kind of drive it where my seat's comfortable and my mirrors are comfortable, and not necessarily where my steering wheel's comfortable. And I don't want to necessarily mess around with that. So I love power steering column. I think that's kind of like a nice thing. I know you're not moving it all the time if you're the only one driving it, but if you do share that car with someone,
you do.
It is kind of nice to do that. And some of the competitors was the other. Was there anything else you wanted to bring up?
Just yeah.
I jotted down some of the competitors real quick. In Lexus world, it can be the NX or even the RX.
Yeah, so technically NX, if you're out there doing your product comparisons, the NX, it was built to compete with the RDX, and I say that because RDX was first, and then Lexus created a smaller SUV. But it's a little bit of in between the two, right?
It is,
so it lives between the NX and the RX. It's a little bit bigger than the NX, smaller than the RX.
And people that drive the NX, and maybe you have one, but people don't like it. I've driven the one we had here. It was really a choppy ride for a Lexus, and it's pretty much the same price point as an RDX. So and it's much smaller.
Yeah, that's one thing that I noticed. It is, it's not quite the refined Lexus you expect.
Right.
And it's certainly, not like the RDX or even like the RX and the Lexus. Yeah. And it's small. The size just doesn't. I mean, it's tight.
Yeah. So not to say cross that one off the list. I know people compare it because of the price point, and people don't realize how small it is. But and then the RX, like you were saying, the RX, it is a super nice car. They've done a really good job with that. But again, price point is that of an MDX,
and it was built to compete with that MDX
exactly.
platform.
Yeah. Infinity, which boy, I don't know if they make cars anymore, but apparently they still do. But the
QX50 is the
that's a competitor with that one. That's a car we don't hear a lot of. When people are cross shopping in RDX, it's funny. The comparisons are not what. It's weird. It's not like how it is with the MDX. Like you don't hear stuff about the Infinity. I hear a little bit of the rumblings. Like he was talking about, his customer did look at is about to look at the GV70, the small one.
The GV70's kind of taken what I say what used to be the Infinity placeholder.
Oh, sure. Yeah,
right? And people used to have Infinity on their list. They don't as much anymore. We just took in two QX50s. Matter of fact, they replaced them with RDXs that were the same year, which was really interesting. So there were 20 QX50s. They're twins, back to back, for the same week. And they both replaced them with a 20 RDX. Like, they didn't even move up. They just said, I just want the RDX.
I'm not sure what that's all about. I don't know. I know I wasn't involved in that one, but... maybe
but the Genesis GV is another one that's on the list as and I don't know as much about that car, but it probably was built just like the GV80 to compete with the MDX, and in that class, the GV70 was built to compete with the RDX.
Like pretty much directly. I mean, the size and everything is pretty much the same as far as like offerings go. I'm not like super familiar with like what engine offers. It's a 4-cylinder turbo. I know that.
Sure.
And then the Volvo XC60, that's always been kind of a staple with Volvo. It is a nice car.
And that comes and goes. That's like a roller coaster because Volvo, I don't think Volvo per se redesigns their cars as often as some maybe other manufacturers. So when it changes, we hear a lot about it. When it doesn't, we don't hear as much about it. Yeah. But it's very comparable. The BMW X3, of course, is probably one of the top competitors.
And that reminds me of how the Lexus is, because people do talk about the X3 and the X5 as far as like size and price point. It's kind of similar in that realm. X5 is kind of a little bit bigger than an RDX, but again, people do cross shop. It's more expensive for sure.
Sure, and then the Audi Q5 is the next one. And again, both Audi Q5 and the BMW X3 have both grown up. So they're almost a touch bigger than the RDX now. And they never used to be. Actually, they were smaller, and then they've kind of surpassed it.
Right.
And that used to be my old thing in the business. I said, someday we're going to stop saying that the trunk is bigger on our car because you just can't keep making it bigger. And that used to be every year. It was who came on the car? Okay, who has the most trunk space?
Right.
That used to be the thing.
Like the benchmark.
Like that was the benchmark. It's just who kept gaining more trunk space.
Right.
Well, eventually you have to stop measuring trunk space because the car can't just be all trunk.
Right, or else it's just going to be like an MDX with the third row down or
something.
And
that's what the Q5 kind of did that. It went from small to medium to almost large.
Yeah.
And now I don't know if they're outside their class.
Right.
I haven't parked one next to the Q7, but I bet you it's really close.
Right. And what I'm really happy to say is that I never hear anyone talking about the Hyundais or Kias in comparison to the RDX.
So we have a lot of people that upgrade or maybe step up.
Yeah, from like a Tucson or something like that. And I bring that up because on the MDX and really the MDX, people do compare the Telluride or the Palisade, and obviously they feel like it's at the price point's a little lower, but they feel like luxury wise that's just the case. Whereas those other ones aren't there at all, in my opinion. Like the Santa Fe or the Tucson, they're just not as nice. But again, that's something that we typically hear. I don't know if there's any other ones. I guess the Mazda CX-50. I know we talked about Mazda a little bit last time.
The Mazda CX-50 is probably a nice car to put on that list if you're thinking, well, I like the RDX, but it's just outside my price point. That is a great car to look at as far as trying to get something closer. Clearly, if you drive them both and look at them both, you're going to start to see a difference. But Mazda designed that car almost with a RDX in the background, saying, okay. Yeah. This is what we like, and this is what we're going to take from it. If you notice the screen, the operation of things,
that's right.
It's very similar.
It's not a touch screen.
Yeah.
So, just keep that in mind.
That's a great car to put on the list. Power plant is not much different. So
Yeah. I mean, obviously the RDX, like overall, it checks a ton of boxes. I love the RDX, and I know I work here, but I really do. I do love the MDX as well. I just feel like the RDX has a little more boxes checked, and it does a really good job of filling that. For us, it's a really strong sweet spot for us.
Well, it's just hard out in the market, in the environment today, to look at cars that are in the 40 up to 50. I mean, it's really kind of low 40s to 50,000.
Yeah,
that's a lot of cars, and it's not so much luxury cars anymore. So a lot of regular cars fit in that price category. So RDX gets on a lot of lists.
Yeah,
right?
It does.
And it's hard to beat what you get in it if it size and everything fits you.
Right. And I know you mentioned earlier like availability. So
right now, and we don't want to tout this too much because times changed, but Acura's struggling to produce many RDXs, but we also know that Honda's also struggling to produce CRVs, and that's a new CRV for them. So I don't know if the supplier constraints. I'm sure we still have some chip problems. So they're slow to come in, but there has been some availability.
Yep.
Seems like certain trims are left out to dry, but there has been some availability on the car.
There has been. We have a handful, but they're all the A specs. So,
mostly A specs, a handful of tax. The entry level ones, the premium package, is really hard to get a hold of. And same way with the advanced package. There's just obviously with that extra tech, it's hard to get.
Is there anything else you had to say about that?
No, RDX. Okay. I knew that, and we don't want to sound like we just want to tell you everything good about it. But if you checked one out yourself, and you're in the market for a car like that, it's a hard car to say a lot of bad things about.
Yeah, for sure. And like you said, it's not just because we work, not just because we work here. I mean, we really do see, a lot of the stuff that, we see stuff out there, and again, the price point, everything else, it really makes sense. So if you're in the market for an RDX, put it high on your list. It really should be extra high on your list just simply because of all those things that we talked about.
Oh, and the one thing we were going to mention, and we'll have another episode, we'll talk a little bit about crash test ratings.
Oh, yeah.
But the RDX is a Insurance Institute top safety pick plus.
Yep.
That's a mouthful.
Yeah, and I know we were going to do one, and maybe depending on the timeline when you put this one out, but I wanted to kind of do some research about like the safety ratings and stuff like that because there's a lot of confusing stuff out there.
Yeah, and I think the perception is there's only certain brands that are really safe,
right?
And that's wrong. And we'll talk a little bit more about that as time goes on. Acura's a very safe brand. Matter of fact, Honda, just a reminder, Honda is an engineering company first that happens to build cars, and safety is one of the top things on their list.
Right. They just don't advertise it like same thing with all-wheel drive. Like, all-wheel drive is Subaru and Audi, and safety is Subaru and Volvo.
Right.
But somehow Subaru meets both those things. But, it's not like that brand's any safer. In fact, it might be less safe in some areas than
and we'll talk. That's a good. You brought up a good point because I know we were talking about some of the features, and we'll dive into this on another episode. But we'll talk about features and how they work. So not all features are created equal, as much as no matter how much the manufacturer advertises or touts those.
Yeah.
And I use Subaru as the brand example because I have both Subaru and Acura at home, and I can tell you that their highly touted features aren't as good as the non-touted Acura features.
Right.
So same features. So on the piece of paper, it looks the same, but in action, it's different.
That's a good. I like that. We hooked them this time. I don't think we've hooked you guys before, so that'll be in the next one. We'll do some research to make sure we know what we're talking about, so we don't sound like idiots. But again, thank you so much for tuning in. We appreciate all the comments. So great comments.
Yeah.
We do.
Thanks for the
them.
feedback on the last one. It was good to hear. So we know what direction people like to go.
Yeah, and I think this was a lot of. We have fun with these things because this is stuff that we talk about all the time, like in our little.
If you sat in this office during the day, those are the same things.
Half the time when we're doing numbers, we're talking about other stuff. But with regards to the car, man, I wish they would do this, or I really like this. It's just something that I think in the car business that we like to talk about, and it's important as a brand to make sure that we talk about that stuff. So if anyone is listening, that they know like what we hear from our clients, because that's I think what we try to talk about is what people.
Yeah, the feedback we get from you guys as customers coming in the doors, either liking this or not liking this, why they didn't buy it, or they did buy it, or they bought XYZ because they didn't like this.
Exactly, yeah. It's great feedback. Thank you again so much for watching. Make sure to like and subscribe. I know I should say that at the beginning because that's really where your attention level is. But so like and subscribe. Any comments, they're awesome. We appreciate them. Thank you so much for watching. Have a great night.
And we'll see you soon.